Economics, finance, politics. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. I'm Francine Lacqua, the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now let's focus on the future of Australia. Entering its third decade of continuous growth, Australia's economic track record is reason to celebrate. But there are, of course, clouds on the horizon. No developed country is more dependent on China's now slowing economy. At home, there are signs of stagnant wage growth and falling property prices. And, of course, the country has been dealing with devastating wildfires, the worst in recent memory. Well, joining us now is Australia's Minister for Finance, Matthias Cormann, and I'm also delighted to be joined by Haslinda Amin here for more perspective. Minister, thank you for joining us. Let's start with the fires, because it's unclear to me when you speak to various members of your government whether there's an acknowledgement that this is because of climate change, or is this just something that Australia has to go through?
Well, I mean, we've been quite clear and on the record. Of course, climate change has an impact. I mean, we have had bushfires in Australia for thousands of years, and indeed, we have a regular bushfire season, but we absolutely acknowledge that climate change has worsened the intensity of these fire events, and that is something that we very clearly have acknowledged.
Okay, but you know, the Prime Minister has said he wants to tread very carefully on climate policy or targets because he doesn't want to hurt jobs in fuel-intensive industries.
Well, what we are saying is that we are focused and we're committed to policies that are environmentally effective and economically responsible. I mean, we do have a commitment to effective action on climate change. In fact, we are one of a handful of countries around the world that will not just meet but beat its emission reduction targets agreed to in Kyoto. We will beat those by more than 400 million tons of CO2. We are on track to meet and beat our emissions reduction targets agreed to in Paris. And in fact, on a per capita basis, that is a commitment to a reduction in emissions by half. The emissions intensity in our economy is on track to reduce by 2/3. So, I mean, that is more ambitious than the European Union, than Canada, than New Zealand, than many other countries around the world. So we do have effective measures in place, but in the end, what we are guided by is whether a particular measure will make things better for the environment and not actually inadvertently make things worse, as well as being economically responsible.
But this is also a government, the Morrison government, isn't really buying into renewables. I mean... Well,
that is false. That is plainly false. I mean, we are a world leader when it comes to investing in renewable energy. So 25% of our energy supplies in our national electricity markets come from renewables today. By 2030, that is expected to reach 50%. And, you know, on a per capita basis, bearing in mind the population of 25 million people across whom we are spreading the cost, on a per capita basis, we are investing more than twice as much into renewables than Germany or France, just to name a few.
Now, in terms of the bushfires, it may be too early to add up the cost. Do you have any initial estimates what this is costing?
Well, you know, obviously we've made a commitment in terms of our bushfire recovery investment to a $2 billion investment fund. In terms of the costs, you know, overall, I mean, that's too early to quantify, but we will, of course, you know, monitor all the data as it comes in and make this reconciliation in time for the budget in May.
When you look at the U.S.-China trade deal, is Australia a net loser, and will you appeal to China or U.S. for better terms?
Australia and every trading nation around the world, including the U.S. and China, are a winner from better trade relations between the U.S. and China. When we were meeting here in Davos last year, there was obviously a lot of concern around the world about escalating trade tensions between the U.S. and China. We welcome the fact that there have been these developments and this Phase 1 agreement being put in place. There's obviously more work to be done, but in the end, a better trade relationship between the US and China, with some of these long-standing issues resolved in a sustainable fashion, that is good for the US and China, it's good for the world, it's good for Australia.
Why should we be optimistic about this Phase 1 deal when tariffs are still in place till November? That would impact exports, that would impact a country like Australia.
Well, there is real and constructive engagement in relation to obviously some long-standing issues of concern, and you know, resolving these issues and reaching a sustainable accommodation between the US and China in the context of a rules-based multilateral trade framework, you know, is obviously something that is welcomed by trading nations around the world.
But will you not go to China and ask for better terms when it comes to energy and agriculture products?
Well, look, we have a high-quality trade agreement between Australia and China, and we are involved, of course, in the RCEP negotiations, which also involve China. So, I mean, Australia continues to work all around the world to secure opportunities to get better market access and to get better opportunity for Australian consumers to get access to affordable, high-quality products.
S&P has said that your AAA rating could be at risk. How do you respond to
to that?
Well, we maintained and have maintained for some time now a AAA credit rating from all of the major credit ratings agencies. I mean, I'm not going to provide running commentary on commentary. Obviously, we note that all of the ratings agencies in recent times have reconfirmed Australia's AAA credit rating.
But do the fires change everything? So have you been in contact with rating agencies since?
Well, firstly, it's too early to assess the economic impact on Australia from those fires. But what I would note is that the Australian economy has proven to be very resilient. We're into our 29th year of continuous growth. Of course, slower global growth has had an impact. The drought and floods earlier in 2019, and indeed now the bushfires are having an impact. But our economy continues to grow. Wages continue to grow faster than inflation. And I've got to correct something from your introduction. Real wages growth is right on 0.6% on the average that it has been for the last 30 years. And indeed, I mean, okay, so nominal wages growth is lower, but inflation is lower than it has been historically too. So,
right,
so real wages growth, the gap between wages growth and inflation is precisely on the average it has been over the last 30 years.
All right, so too short a time. You'll have to come back so we really get into some of the widening gap that we've been talking about. The Australian